So again, hi all of you. Now we are into the second segment. Right now we are into hi all of you. We are into the second segment of the human respiratory system. In the beginning part of this questions part, what we have seen is we have seen the organs of the respiratory system. Now we'll see the introductory aspects of the respiratory system, the conducting part and the respiratory part of the respiratory system. What what organs and what kind of questions can be expected from that area? Yes, so we shall begin with the first question. Now, the human respiratory system has a thin elastic cartilaginous flap, right? A thin elastic cartilaginous flap which prevents the entry of food into the larynx. It is known as, right? So when you swallow the food, and the food supposedly should go for the esophagus. Yes, should go into the esophagus. It should not come into the trachea. So over the trachea we have this larynx. Yes, over this trachea we have this larynx. No, larynx is being covered by a cartilage. Cartilage in the larynx will have 9 bones. Sorry, 9 cartilages in the larynx. In the larynx, we have 9 cartilages. Biggest of all the cartilages that we have is the thyroid cartilage. Thyroid cartilage, and what this thyroid cartilage, or the smallest cartilage. So that is called as, what is the question? Right? Is it glottis, windpipe, epiglottis, or the bronchiole? Right? We can obviously make a guess here. So that is the epiglottis. So a cartilage that is over the glottis. Over the glottis is the epiglottis. Epiglottis is the opening. Okay, tracheal opening. And windpipe is nothing but the trachea. Bronchiole is towards the end of the bronchial tubes. So your right answer is epiglottis. Yes, right answer is the epiglottis. At which level of thoracic vertebrae trachea divides? It's a direct question, right? That is fifth thoracic vertebrae. So this direct question should have to be remembered. It's not second, third, or fourth. It's the fifth thoracic vertebrae. There is no explanation for it. You got to be remembering. So what is getting divided? The trachea. The trachea gets divided. It goes to the respective lungs. Right lung and the left lung. Trachea divides into right and left lungs. Right? So when trachea divide into right and left lungs into two branches which goes to right and left lungs, what do we call them? What do we call them? So we call them as primary bronchi. So trachea is a straight tube. Now it got divided. So once it got divided, you start calling them as the bronchi, right? Once it got divided, you start calling them as the bronchi. And in here, the bronchi begins with the primary bronchi, then you have the secondary bronchi, followed by tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, right? So you'll have tertiary bronchi will be bronchioles further down the line. So as they keep getting narrower and narrower. So your answer now for this question is the primary bronchi. So which membrane covers the lungs and provide protection? Right? So which membrane covers the lungs, provides the protection? Just like many organs, we also have protective covering here. Say for example, if you take the heart, you have the pericardium. What is this renal capsule? Renal capsule is the connective tissue capsule which covers the kidney, outer side of the kidney. Okay, so epineurium is for the nerve. And pleura is the covering that is of interest for us now here. Right? That is of interest for us now here. So this is what we got to be knowing. Okay, so we are seeing the pleura here. So pleura. So we're just making an adjustment here. Okay, so we have seen this, right? So which membrane covers the lungs and provide protection is the pleura does it. So the next part that we have is, I'll just minimize this. Okay. Now, where are lungs situated in the human body? What is the location of them? Right. So lungs are pulmonary cavity. Where it is? It is in the. Is it in the abdominal cavity, thoracic cavity, coelomic cavity, or the pleural cavity? Right. So pleural cavity is nothing but the pulmonary cavity, lung cavity. So where is this lung cavity is present is the question. It is present in the thoracic cavity. Right? In the thoracic cavity, we have all these organs, but major portion is occupied by the lungs itself. Right? Thoracic cavity is the right answer. Abdominal cavity, what do we have? We have this all these abdominal organs, right? The stomach, the spleen, and the liver, all of this. But not liver is slightly kind of mediator organ, right? So primarily you can say the stomach and the spleen, right over the stomach will have the spleen as well. So what is the last step involved in the respiration? So we have a sequence of steps. First, diffusion, right? First exchange of gases, then the transport of gases. Again, take it to the tissues. If we see, is it the diffusion of gases? Diffusion of gases will be the first one, right? Breathing is the bringing in the gases. Bringing in the gas, first you breathe, so that atmospheric air has been brought in, then it will be exchanged. So it cannot be the first one. Utilization of the O2 by body cells and resultant release of the CO2 are the transportation of the gases. If you see the sequence here, first is the breathing, right? First is the breathing, followed by, so we shall write that here. So first is the breathing. First is the breathing, followed by what? First is the breathing, followed by, so first is the breathing, then followed by what do we get? Right, followed by, you will get the diffusion, right? Diffusion of gases, followed by transportation. So what is the medium of transport that we have? The medium of transport is blood. So all these gases are diffused into the blood. Blood transports them. Yes. Now, so we're going to see about the transportation as well. Transport. Then once they're transported, they're diffused back into the cells, right? Then you have the usage. Then we have the usage of these gases. These gases will be utilized. Okay. So these are the four methods, processes, how it happens. Now, the right answer that we have here is the utilization of the O2 by body cells. That is our right choice. Okay, Adam's apple is another name for what? So we have discussed in the class, it's a prominence. It's a cartilage prominence that you would see. Adam's apple is present in the biggest of cartilage of the larynx region. That is the thyroid cartilage. It is the thyroid cartilage. Sound box in birds. What is the sound box in birds? It is the syrinx, right? Sound box in man, larynx. But larynx prominence only. And if there is no thyroid cartilage answer, you can go for this. But since they have directly given the thyroid cartilage, so the answer should be this. The answer should be the thyroid cartilage, right? Adam's apple is another name for the thyroid cartilage, right? So your right choice will be thyroid cartilage. Which of the following prevents the collapsing of trachea, right? So muscles, diaphragm, ribs, and cartilaginous rings. So this is also easy question, right? It is cartilaginous rings, right? Ribs, what is the function of the ribs? They protect the organs of thoracic cavity. Lungs, heart, primarily are being protected by the ribs, right? So that is the function. So here The trachea is protected by cartilaginous strings from the getting collapsed. Yes, diaphragm. So diaphragm or the location. So it divides. It's a muscle. It divides the abdominal cavity with the thoracic cavity. Now a pair of external nostrils, right, in humans opens out. Pair of external nostrils opens out where? The location. So below the upper lips, above the upper lips, above the upper lips, and between the upper and lower lips, and above the larynx. So it's easy, right? So is it between the upper and lower lips? We have the mouth. Yes. Above the larynx, no, right? Above the larynx, we have the pharynx. It's not that. Above the upper lips and below the upper lips. Below the upper lips, we have the lower lip. Below the upper lips, what we have? We have the lower lip. So you don't have on the below the upper lips, you have the mouth. Right? Below the upper lips, you have the mouth. Above the upper lips is the right choice. Right? Above the upper lips, kind of easy question only. So what is the function of respiratory part of the human respiratory system? Respiratory part. Right? So this is the keyword. So we have conducting part and we have the exchange part. Right? This exchange part otherwise is also called as respiratory part. Right? Where the exchange is taking place is also called as the respiratory part. What does it do? It clears the incoming air from the foreign particles. Who does that function? So it is being done by the nasal cavity, right? So this function is being performed by nasal cavity. It brings the temperature of air up to the body temperature. The conditioning of air, we have seen that before. This conditioning of air is also the function of the nasal cavity again. It transports the atmospheric air. So who does that function, right? So it is the blood. Atmospheric air, when it is diffused, transportation is the process of blood. Exchange of O2 and CO2 between the blood and atmospheric air. So that is the respiratory part. Respiratory part is the alveoli where this exchange is happening. So that your choice is this. Okay. And if the thoracic wall but not the lung wall is punctured, what happens? Right? Thoracic wall is punctured but not the lung wall. If you see, when you see the anatomy of the lungs, in the morning itself I have explained, right? So the parietal pleura is almost merged. It's almost merged with the thoracic cavity. And if you puncture it, what's going to happen? The lungs wall, the parietal pleura is also getting ruptured, and that leads to the collapsing of lungs. Leads to the collapsing of lungs. You see, there are no independent muscles in the lungs itself. The muscles that are present in the thoracic cavity serve to function as the respiratory devices. And if there is no thoracic cavity, pulmonary cavity doesn't do anything, right? So it will not be able to inhale and exhale the gases. So that is why it's not the lungs getting inflated, doesn't happen. So what happens is the person dies because lungs gets collapsed. They will not be able to inhale and exhale the gases. Adam's apple. Adam's apple, just now we have seen, it's a different sort of question, almost similar. Adam's apple is the derivative of, so where it is derived from is, it is derived from the thyroid cartilage. Yes, it is derived from the thyroid cartilage. Yes, and the space in between the lungs. So these are the different kinds of cartilages that are there in the larynx region. Epiglottis, corniculate, cricoid cartilage are the different kinds of cartilages, but we are interested in thyroid cartilage here. The space in between the lungs, right? The space in between the lungs is the mediastinum, right? So where is this space is present? This space, as I have explained before, it is present in the left lung, right? Left lung is larger. I mean, in terms of size, in terms of length, not size, in terms of length, it is of longer, and right lung kind of, broader, compared, a tad, a small amount. It's not that big of a difference, but the space that is there is the mediastinum, so that the heart can be housed there in between the lungs. Which structure in human respiratory system is involved in conditioning of air? That is nasal chamber. So this question I have moved here, and we keep getting back to this question. So what you need to be aware of here is, so this is constantly asked question. So please, keep it in mind. The common factors in the trachea of mammals and insects. Right? Common factors in the trachea and mammals, trachea of mammals and insects. That is it ciliated inner lining, non-collapsible wall, pale structure, and the head region. So it's non-collapsible wall, right? So we have cartilaginous rings there. There is also in the cockroaches also, so that it doesn't collapse. So that is the answer for you. And conducting part of the respiratory system is formed. Right? Conducting part of the respiratory system is formed. What? By what? Yes, conducting part. Now, the conduction, what does it do? So, what is to what extent you would call it as the conducting, and after that, what do we call? So, we have two parts, right? There is conducting, and then there is exchanging part. There is conducting part, and then there is exchanging part. Conducting part begins with external nostrils up to initial bronchioles. No, it goes to the terminal bronchioles. So that from the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchioles. So yeah, so this is tertiary bronchioles as a matter of fact. So then we have the respiratory bronchioles, so it's a part of the alveoli. So from the external nostrils to, you can say the terminal bronchioles. So I'll just once verify this. Terminal bronchiole. So there is this something called respiratory bronchiole. I mean, it is part of this respiratory tree and the respiratory exchange zone. Respiratory exchange zone. Yes, it is from the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchiole. Or as per NCERT, we can say tertiary bronchiole. Right? As per NCERT, we can say go for tertiary bronchiole. So anyway, so this is your answer here, the B. And the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system is formed by, right? So this is the alveoli. Alveoli, duct of alveoli, trachea, no external nostrils, no external nostrils. Alveoli and different ducts of alveoli will be the exchange part or the respiratory part. Both are same. Food and air. Food and air pathways are divided at food and air pathways. Food and air pathways are divided at where? In the pharynx. Pharynx is the common passageway. Right? Pharynx is the common passageway for food and air. So that is where they are getting divided. So one goes to the lungs, another goes to the where? To the across the thoracic cavity to the abdominal cavity, alimentary canal. Okay. What is the site of actual diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air? Right? So blood and atmospheric air. So here, so that is exchange of respiratory system, exchange part of the respiratory system, conducting part of the respiratory system, the respiratory part of the respiratory system. Right? So here it's kind of tricky here. You know, A and B are same. Exchange part and respiratory part is same. Conducting part, there is no involvement of alveoli there. Right? There is no involvement of alveoli. So that is why, so you should go for both 1 and 3. So your right choice is 1 and 3 because these two are of same meaning. Exchange part and the respiratory part of the are of the same meaning. Okay, the anatomical setup of the lungs in the thorax is such that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity, right? I'll just I haven't typed it here, so there is it should be A and B here. So anyway, you can make a guess. So it should be reflected in volume of thoracic cavity will be reflected in the pulmonary cavity, right? So is it thoracic cavity and abdominal cavity? No, abdominal cavity below the thoracic cavity, so it isn't that. Pulmonary cavity and thoracic cavity, they have given it in the reverse, right? And abdominal cavity and lung cavity, it's not that. So your choice is thoracic cavity. It's a direct line, right? So all the changes that are there in the thoracic cavity will be reflected in the pulmonary cavity because they are almost in union, almost in are in merging with the other one. The structure that does not contribute to the breathing movements in the mammals, right? So among these, is it ribs, diaphragm, and intercostal muscles? Morning I have explained the mechanism of breathing. So in the mechanism of breathing, ribs have the costal muscles. right? And diaphragm has this phrenic muscles, has this phrenic muscles, they keep getting flattened and attain the shape of dome again. And intercostal muscles, they pull the ribs. So what doesn't have a role here? The larynx. It's just, larynx just carries it. So breathing movements, it doesn't do anything, right? What is the so-called breathing movements here is, the inhalation, exhalation, the chest, the ribs are just, going upwards and going downwards, pulling outward, right? And again back to its original position. All those breathing movements, larynx has doesn't have a role. It's just a voice box which produces this sound. Yes, movements, it doesn't have any role. It's part of the respiratory system. That's it. Okay, movements, it doesn't have any role. So does not contribute is larynx. So all these three have a role. The covering of the lungs, the covering of the lungs, just now we have seen, so it is pleura, they have called it here, pleuris, pleural membrane. So it's pericardium, perichondrium, peritoneum, right? So if you see these options, different kinds of options has been given here when you compare with the previous questions. Pericardium is covering of lungs. Perichondrium is a covering of cartilage, right? So covering of the cartilage, connective tissue covering of a cartilage is perichondrium. Yes, and pleural membrane obviously covers the lungs. Peritoneum is a covering for abdominal organs. Right? It's a covering for abdominal organs. To simply state that. Okay, so your right choice will be pleural membrane. Terminal bronchioles branch to form. Terminal bronchioles branch to form. Is it alveoli, alveolar duct, bronchioles? You can say the respiratory bronchiole, right? So it branches out to form respiratory bronchiole. Respiratory bronchiole part of the alveolar duct, not alveolar duct system. After that, we get the alveolar duct, right? After respiratory bronchioles, and still smaller. So what the point you need to be remembering here is just like how the tree branches, as they move from the earth to top, right? So from the roots to stem, as it branches out, how it gets narrowed and narrowed, smaller and smaller. Same thing is happening here, right? Same thing is happening here. So that is where from the terminal bronchiole you get the respiratory bronchioles. Now, layer of uneven columnar cells which form the tracheal lining are component of. So they said uneven columnar cells. What are uneven columnar cells? You have the pseudostratified, right? So we have, we have simple epithelium, then we have cuboid, right? So and the simple squamous. Then we have the cuboid, then we have the columnar. So all the cells are of same shape and size. Yes, but if you see pseudostratified, you don't have correct order. So some are of long, some are of short. So that is why uneven, and they are columnar. So the which where the line is, they line the trachea, right? So layered tracheal lining is the pseudostratified epithelium. So this one is the right choice. Brush border epithelium, cuboid epithelium. Okay, brush border epithelium is the cuboid epithelium. Stratified epithelium is the squamous epithelium. You would see in the skin, right? Skin and some internal organs as well. And ciliated epithelium is the columnar epithelium again, but it's not uneven. So it's a long column cells which has the cilia. In mammals, the voice is produced by voice box, that is larynx. Right? That is larynx. And syrinx in the birds, bronchus, it's just a tubular system. Inhalation, exhalation is the movements. Vocal cords, where do we see vocal cords? Vocal cords are present in the larynx. Yes, larynx is the common passageway. This is all we have seen so far. The lungs of mammals have a thin wall composed of. Lungs of mammals. Lungs of mammals have a thin wall. A thin wall composed of what? Lungs of mammals have a thin wall composed of stratified cuboid epithelium, simple cuboid epithelium, simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium. Right? Lungs of mammal have a thin wall composed of stratified cuboid epithelium, simple cuboid epithelium, and simple squamous epithelium. At this, I'll just So this I'll just have to verify once. I'll just verify and let you know. Stratified cuboid epithelium, simple cuboid epithelium, and simple squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium. I'll get back to this one. Identify the parts of the respiratory tract without C-shaped cartilages. Without C-shaped cartilages that we have is it the terminal bronchioles, secondary bronchi, primary? It's terminal, because up to tertiary bronchi we have this, right? Up to tertiary bronchi we have this cartilaginous rings. Terminal bronchi doesn't have them, right? Terminal bronchi doesn't have them. Lungs do not enclose. So is it bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli? So lungs, trachea branches out and goes to the lungs. That's why, so bronchi, primary bronchi, bronchioles and all of them will have the lungs. Trachea doesn't, right? Trachea doesn't have, because it's a straight tube. So lungs aren't there. And pharynx opens into trachea through. The pharynx opens into trachea through which tube? Opens into trachea, glottis, syrinx, alveoli, the glottis, right? So it has the glottis. On the larynx we have the glottis, covering the glottis we have the epiglottis at the time of swallowing. Gullet is the other name for esophagus, and syrinx is the voice box in birds, and alveoli no. Now trachea divides into bronchi at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae. This we have seen already, right? At the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae. So that is one segment we have completed, the respiratory system. Almost, if you follow these 31 questions, and it almost clarifies your doubts. Okay, so that is the part of discussion for us in this segment. In the next segment, we'll see the mechanism of breathing. Thank you. Please support this channel. Hopefully, we shall do more number of questions, more